Can you just give us a quick overview of who you are, what you do?
Who I am, what I do. I'm based in Brisbane, in Australia. Lived here for more than 30 years. We first came here when I was a little boy. So I was brought up here in this country. And it was in the mid 90s. It was my sister and I in the family, and we finished school here. And during that time, we've learned a lot about cultural differences and reconciling that between our upbringing, who we are, and how that is informed by not just by the older members of the family, but also there's a faith aspect to that. And brought up in a country where predominantly at the time we are considered as minorities, and but nonetheless we've gone past that, and now we are seeing communities where it's diverse. We are working towards inclusivity, and it's a multicultural place. And now I find myself leading a team from distance. It's a multicultural, multi-generational team of people who are hardworking, and I lead them remotely. I've got people based in Australia, right across the country, and here in Brisbane leading a diverse team. I love working with people, and my education background is in people management, HR, and leadership. I love working with people, and throughout all that time, learn about how you lead people and manage change, and how do you do that well, and how do you, for me, as part of my upbringing, the core values that I've been brought up with are things like curiosity. So learning is one of my core values. Respect, learning and being respectful, tactfulness and diplomacy.
So did you say it was you came to the country at 5?
When I was little, yeah, I lived the first 10 years of my life in Southeast Asia in Singapore. And came here when I was 10.
So what was that like, moving to a different continent, different country?
Yeah, look, at the time, being a 10-year-old boy, there wasn't really much to think about. The only elements that I miss was my family, extended family, and a bunch of close friends. They were the two main elements that I miss in retrospect. But otherwise, I'm always a forward-looking, optimistic kind of person. I make friends easily, I make connections, and that's not a problem. But it's the people who I leave behind that's a bit of a struggle.
So what was it like so you left behind? So that must have been like a very traumatic experience, and then I'm guessing, having to adjust to somewhere very different.
Yeah, it was. And being introduced to a new community as well, where you don't know them, they don't know you, it starts from scratch. The things that got me through, things that's been taught to me since I was little, being forward looking and build up, being optimistic. And that has an overlay of a faith aspect to that, Rob, knowing who you are, who you belong to, and knowing what's in your heart and who's walking with you day to day, the belief system and the support structures that's been put around me by my parents and the faith community has really got me through the tough times here.
So you have a very close family and a very tight-knit community of faith.
Yes, absolutely. That's right. And I think those are the essential elements. Now looking back and how I adapted and adjusted to a new lifestyle, new way of living, and different, even a new way of learning as well.
So what I'm imagining is there's like this bubble around you, and this bubble moved. So even though it's different friends, different school, different community, different world, you've still got the core, which made you feel that you were safe.
Yeah, that's right. It's like a Venn diagram or ikigai, different circles, and it all culminates, or there's an area where the circles overlap. And that's the core of who I am, and having ownership of that, and knowing that belongs to me, how that's worked through, and the connection I have with people right, left, up and down, everywhere. And that culminates into the center circle of who I am, knowing that has kept me safe and well.
Okay. So that was coming at that age, it was obviously something that impacted you. I see a link between that and what you do now. Is that, do you see that link?
I do see, yeah, I haven't intentionally sat down and done a reflection, but now as you ask the question, there is definitely a link somewhat to my upbringing, who I am, and where it's led me, and perhaps maybe even where I'm going next. The fact that my family, strong networks, strong support structures, it's all made up of people, and people who love other people in their family. And so when I come across others, that mindset has been instilled in me, assume positive intentions. And the philosophy in my leadership is not being about the best, it's about making others better. And that has also been informed by people who have brought me up during my childhood and the kindness others have shown to me. And it's a way of paying that forward, paying it that back. And also growing up in a society where it's multicultural, it's multi-generational, and that has informed me in the way I interact with others. And now I find myself leading a team of people who are diverse, who come from different cultural aspects, and people who, of age bracket where people at one end of the age bracket where they're like my mum and dad, to people who are really young, as young as someone who could be my younger sister, or being able to work right across a continuum of where people find themselves at a certain point in time in their lives. And that's what I think has made me successful in my role.
Because what I'm getting strongly from you is very much about the awareness of different cultures, awareness of all kinds of areas of diversity, and you seem able to take that and make it all work together, which I think is one of the challenges that people face.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah.
Okay, so you come to Brisbane and you grow up there. What happens between coming to Brisbane and where you are now?
The Brisbane's where I am now. It's the formative years of my education, learning about how the world functions, the world of business. So having the technical expertise in what does it mean, leading people to manage change, what are the tools, the skill sets that you need, learning the different techniques, and even the legislative landscape that governs so much what we do, whether something that can be done or not. So learning about all that. So having that technical component coupled with my, if you like to call it, cultural awareness or emotional intelligence, combining all that in what I do today. To your point too, Rob, like leading a team in person physically is different to leading a team from distance. In the different facial expressions or words that people use over a screen, having the awareness to think about whether there's something brewing or festering or going on when that person is based, working in isolation. What is the tone that they are using? Is there something else that's going on that as a manager you're not aware of? Being cognizant of all that and resolving the conflict that they're facing, that the challenges that come up with when they're working in isolation, whether it's work volumes that you don't actually see when you're not in person, but it's through the regular check-ins and one-on-ones, having the awareness, the questions that you ask to draw people to give you the response that you need to know. It's a combination of all that, along with the education and the technical awareness, technical expertise, and so all of that combined.
Okay, that sounds fascinating. So when you talk about technical expertise, so you developed the technical expertise and then you got promoted into the role as the leader of the team.
Yeah, it's the technicalities in my role, what I'm required in the previous role, in the current role. There is overlap, but there isn't a direct link. In my previous role, I was actually in HR management, and in managing in HR, you need to know how the employment laws of the land, the labor laws, the legislative landscape that governs your advice, what you can, or the advice that you give to managers, what you can and can't do. There's anti-discrimination laws, all these other, the lay of the land that you need to be aware of to give sound advice. So that was my previous role. In the current role, it's more about using the knowledge, the transferable skills that you've got in interpreting legislation, in understanding how the what do you call them, the law book, you interpret all that. So it's interpretation skills, taking that and applying that skill set in my current role, if you know what I mean. So there's no direct transfer, understanding employment laws, but it's skill in doing that in my current job. So one word that comes to mind is compliance. How do you comply with, for example, when you work with children, what are the compliance needs that we need to meet?
Okay. And the other thing that I'm really interested in is, so when you moved roles, was it always remote or has it become remote since then?
It has become remote since I come to this current role. In the previous role, it's dispensing advice. You can do that over the phone. In a sense, that's remote, even though the managers were advised same city that I'm in. But because they're on the road, it's hard to come together and meet in person. In this current role, there's like the day-to-day requirements of leading a team and managing change, and that's all based remotely, and people who are actually based outside of Brisbane, who are not in the city that I live in. So in that sense, yeah, it's directly remote.
As you mentioned, there's a whole host of ways it becomes more challenging when it's remote, because normally you can see someone's body language and you can tell, okay, they're having a bad day. It's much harder to do it through email or even over Zoom or Teams or whatever. So tell me about some of the challenges and what you've learned, because I'm guessing you would have learned a lot from that process.
Yeah, when the saying out of sight, out of mind, and there's this bias called proximity bias, where if someone is not close to you, you tend to forget, you tend to leave them out of your mind because they're not there in your presence. So the key is being aware of the different biases that's in your head, or that can play out in remote work settings. So this is being aware of that. And so now that you're aware of that, what are you going to do about it? So when you're leading people and managing change, you have to be cognizant of who your stakeholders are. And one of the things I have to do is to actually, even if it's a 10, 15-minute exercise, and actually consciously, without any noise around you, pull up a Word document and actually who your stakeholders are. Who's responsible for this thing? Who is accountable for this task? Who do I need to consult? Who needs to be kept informed? So mapping out your stakeholders in that way. And now that you know about the biases that could carry in when you're leading remotely, think about your teams. Don't forget about your team into your stakeholder mapping. And actually then from there, what you do is then you actually need to take action. Scheduling one-on-ones, scheduling team meetings, scheduling check-ins. And the other aspect is communicate and be as transparent as you can. Consult with your team or your stakeholders. And before big major key decisions are made, ask for their feedback. I know these are all, it makes sense, but it's surprising how easily some of these elements can fall on the wayside. So that's one of the things that I've learned is self-aware and then leading your team. And when your team comes together, you see a bunch of them, Brady Bunch format on screen. And some people who are outspoken, they'll always give you something to think about. And in that setting, don't be afraid to draw the quieter ones into the discussion. And linking back to what I just said before, Rob, about the cultural awareness piece, some people might not, there are certain groups of people who value respect so much in such a way that they don't feel that it's their place to leave themselves on mute or unmute themselves and jump in or interrupt. They need to be invited into the space to talk. So be aware of that. Draw them into discussion. Ask others to pause and ask specifically for that person who's been quiet and ask for their opinion and feedback. Being aware of all that, I think, is such a key when we are talking about diversity and inclusion and talking about innovation, because you don't want to build something that only serves a specific group of people. You want it to cater for a wider group. Yep, invite that feedback, talk about it, and be cognizant and aware of how you behave and how you operate. What the top third of you, there's the rest of the body language that you don't see. So just being aware of what you're hearing, the active listening component is key as well in this setting.
I think bias is so important because it's like people are friends with parents of other people that their kids go to school with. And as soon as they finish school, most of that friendship goes. And when you leave work, however much you got along, relationships usually dwindle down because they're not around. So that makes sense in terms of your relation to them. What about the team's relationship to themselves when it's over Zoom and do you ever meet up?
Yeah, that's great, Rob. And there are such things as Slack and Teams and, the different channels that Google group chats where, you can develop channels for the teams to interact with each other. And for sure, and that's something that we've instilled for the last 2.5 years. The chats in the channels can be a bit quiet, but then now it's the different stages of group formation, team formation, forming, storming, norming, performing. And now we are in that norming stage. Now I find that people are actually getting involved in the group chats, starting discussions, asking questions. And pretty soon, I think we'll go into if you're not already, we're in the performing stage. Yeah, so utilizing those channels in group chats to foster further collaboration and questions. Yeah, and even those incidental ones like water cooler chats, like I just had a team member come back from the Americas and was showing us some photos and talking about his experience in America, even though it's all on the chat, but we can just imagine how beautiful that place was and how frustrating you lose a luggage or how beautiful it is you come across the Grand Canyon. So it's beautiful to see.
Technology in some ways distances us, but in others, it's like you can FaceTime someone who's actually there and actually see it in the same way. So,
this is a perfect example, Rob. Here I am in Brisbane, bright sunny day, and where are you?
Yeah, I'm in Ipswich. I'm on the East Coast, about an hour out from London.
Mm-hmm.
Or an
It'll
hour
be
to the
12
east of
o'clock,
London.
middle of the night over there.
Yes. I have to ask you a question. This is the debate that's raging on at the moment. But so there's a lot of companies that are now wanting people to be back in the office, and there's lots of people that have got strong opinions about in person. Everyone should be back in the office. Where do you fall on that?
Where I fall on the continuum is, and I've tasted the fruits of both during lockdown, where everything 100% remote, and we are, due to the circumstances of the pandemic, we're all working remotely. And now that as restrictions lift, in my personal work setting, there's at least 2 days a week. Majority of people come in 1 day a week. Personally, I go in 3 days a week. So the flexibility is there for a hybrid working arrangement. And personally, I feel that the hybrid working arrangement works well and I'm speaking for myself, my personality type, the interactions I need. And for my particular role as well, being in the office, I just know what I need to get done, the files that I need in the office, the people and the resources that I need in the office, the interactions as well, being to mingle with people who are in the office, to encourage each other, to lift each other up. They are essential aspects. And building relationships. And the remote piece, it works on the flip side of the coin, having that time to focus and concentrate, to write my papers, to finish my emails, to make some calls without that interruption. Those ones where people walk past your desk and go, "Can I pick your brains? Did you know about this?" So those kind of interruptions are removed and distractions are removed. And then, so for me, the hybrid working arrangement, works really well. I think though, from an employer perspective, rather than mandating, having that consult with your workforce, thinking about how you can accommodate the flexibility requests, the flexible needs from the employee's perspective, and marry that up with the employer's needs of building culture, building teams, building relationships. If there's a compromise that can be found, that will be the most ideal in terms of for managing your talent, attracting talent. It's good for your talent pool and the continuity of your business.
Yeah, I agree. I think individually, I think different people obviously prefer different things, but I think the mix, the hybrid of being able to have access to work, and because what home can give you is you can do deep work, deep thinking. What work can give you is like the interaction, the collaboration, and access to everything you need. You talked about managing change, initiatives. What do you see are the biggest problems? What are the biggest challenges?
The biggest challenge in managing change is it's not about whether you've got a change plan, whether you've got your strategy, vision papers, and all that. The most difficult thing about managing change, for me personally, how do I say this? It's not a baggage. It's a historical. Okay, so for example, we talk about change. Okay, what are we changing? Usually, we change people, systems, or process. People, systems, or process. So let's talk about people and systems. Okay, you're introducing a new system, so you got to have a vision of why piece. Why are you introducing a new system when the previous system that, from an employee's perspective, using previous system has worked well, has served us well? Why do I need to change? So having that vision drawn out, okay, so we can grow the business, we can scale, we can multiply, so that you can remove a process that you've been doing for quite some time. So speaking of process, okay, and when we change, we're also changing, we might be changing a process. Why are we changing a process? And that's, from an employee's perspective, that's what they know, what they're used to, what they know. And when you're introducing change, they'll be asking why, what for, how is it going to help me? So having the ability to step into the employees or the team's shoes and to draw that vision out for them and speak in their terms. Why? There's some changes I've been involved in. They talk about from a business perspective, if we choose operating costs, it will be more efficient, effective, so on and so forth. Yeah, but for me as a worker, I don't care. I just want to come home, do my job, and something that I know, I love doing, and I know how to do it well. So speaking on behalf of that perspective, why? The most challenging thing from a design thinking process perspective, how do you be person-centered? How do you become other-centered so the resistance to your initiative for change will be smoothed out and reduced significantly? Because the questions they'll be asking is, oh, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? What about this thing that I'm doing? So bringing up a lot of issues, questions, and concerns. So if you're able to spin in their shoes, talk in their terms, the resistance, I think, should somewhat dramatically reduce.
Have you always been on board with the change? Or is sometimes the change that you disagree with personally?
Yeah, there are some changes throughout my working life that I agree with, and there are some changes that's been imposed on me personally. What the things that I agree with, things I found, things that are things that people have brought to my attention and talked to me about, and no matter how long I've come around to that decision, I've kind of been on board with. Those ones that's been imposed on me that I don't quite agree with, but I have to go along with it, is because I have a strong sense of team. I'm also part of this team, and this team is going in a certain direction, and it requires me to be on board so that we can all be unified, so that thinking from an organization perspective, from a team, we are stronger. The tagline is we are stronger together, and seeing the ability to see that and let go of my own personal interests and work with the team. And that's those changes being imposed on me, I have to go along. And that's the mindset that I apply to go along with the change.
In terms of when you're leading the change, when you've then presented it and you've presented in everyone's interest, people innately have a lot of resistance to change? And is that a big barrier?
That can be a barrier. People are resistant to change. Just from a leadership perspective, you just need to understand why. What's causing them to be resistant to that? Is it because they're finding it hard to let go? Is it because we haven't talked to them enough about it? So the question I ask myself in relation to someone else's resistance to change, I'll be asking myself, what's my role in this? How do I help them? How do I help them? What's my responsibility in helping them overcome the resistance? What's the barrier there? Can I remove it for them? I would ask myself, how can I help? Rather than the easier way out is pointing the finger back at them and say, you need to get over it. You need to so and so forth, blah, 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 about you. For me, it's not about that, but it's about me. How do I help them get over the hump, get over the resistance?
And that obviously comes back to your strong sense of faith and that Paul. Not sure how I phrase this, but could you talk a bit about the philosophy or the frame that comes from?
Sorry, I lost you there.
So you said that there's a strong faith element. So
Yeah.
for me, I think what someone's faith is shows the map of that they're working from. And so that's about being future focused, about being community based, about being optimistic. So I'm guessing it's all of those things. Is there
Yes.
anything in that I've missed?
Yeah, it's all of those. And on top of that is what's my interest? Can I put my interest aside to help the other person? So instead of coming to a meeting or making an arrangement to meet my own agenda, meet my own need, the mindset is that I apply is okay, I know what I need to achieve, what the outcomes I want, and this is the mandate that I have to fulfill. But let's put that aside now and talk to each other as human beings and go, all right, what's causing you to feel this way about this change? What are the elements that we've missed? Is there something that you find hard to leave behind? So having that conversation, share stories with one another, take on their feedback. If it's possible to act on their concerns, make sure you do it, because that's from a psychological safety perspective, that's what you want to do, is to hear the other perspective, take on that feedback. If you can act on it, resolve their issues, do that, because that'll foster even more trust and they'll come around to the change that you're trying to implement. Yeah, and that's the other faith aspect as well, is how do you be more person-centered rather than be driven by the agenda.
Just before you go, I'd just like to get your opinion on. So you're right on the forefront of kind of we've gone from physical work, remote work. Where do you see the future being the next, the future of the workplace?
The future of workplace is even going to be even more dynamic. It's not just the debates raging about remote or hybrid, but don't forget there's also the 4-day week that I think it was 12 months ago that was raging. Compressed 5 days. Why are we working 5 days? Do it in 4 days. So that's that aspect. I'm already seeing signs of that. The workplace, chatting with other managers, employees have come forward and asked for a 9-day fortnight, or working 4 days, having 1 day off as annual leave. And as technology improves, how are we going to grapple with all of that flexibility that people want? But then from a business continuity perspective, how do we keep our customers satisfied? How do we keep our innovations going when there are people working 5 days, there are people working 9-day fortnights, working 4-day weeks, some hybrid and some remote, and virtual reality could be coming soon as well. How do we wrestle with all that? I think it will be the work of the future.
Interesting times.
It is.
And it's ironic though, but the more that things change, the more we need the stability of the fundamentals to stay the same. And I can see why you're successful in being able to bring about change and being able to keep together a remote team. And what I see is that whole faith, that sense of community, that strong set of principles is what gives you the mandate you said and the strength, kind of a moral strength. And I can see, I think the more everything else changes out in the world, the more we need that fundamentals. And I can see a direct link from the way that you were raised within what I see as like a cocoon brought out that's given you a strong, firm base. Okay, thank you for sharing your time and your experience and your insights. It's been fascinating to see someone who's making change happen in the cutting edge.
You're welcome, Rob. Thanks for having me.